Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. How badly do the Lakers need Jarred Vanderbilt back? And how much better do they need Austin Reaves to get? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free, and it's never going to be behind a paywall. And you can find Locked On Lakers on YouTube, little startup website called YouTube. Over 25,000 subscribers are hanging out, talking to us, talking to each other, and wondering, Andy, when Jarred Vanderbilt is going to be back, because it would be really nice if the answer to that was fast. So we'll get into that. We will get into some preseason player rankings that reveal a lot about where the Lakers are in terms of roster talent. So all of that coming up. But first, Andy, do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So it's interesting. You know, we spoke at length, Andy, obviously for Wednesday's show, about what happened in Tuesday's game, the loss to the Warriors in Las Vegas. And one of the things that was really clear was that the Lakers did not play particularly well defensively. And for all the stuff,
which was nice because they didn't play that well offensively either.
That's true. And this was a welcome distraction. But, you know, for all the questions of the shooting and this and that, and whatever, one thing has really kind of once again become clear. They miss Jarred Vanderbilt. Still.
The defense is behind the offense right now. Like, even acknowledging when the shots aren't falling, you have a much better idea of what they want to be doing offensively. And I think how, in theory, it will work. Defensively, there is still, I think, a lot that needs to be ironed out, and a really big connector in making that happen is going to be Jarred Vanderbilt, because beyond his individual skills defensively, there's the versatility that he brings as a defender, the versatility of options that he offers JJ Redick in terms of different floor combinations. There's the defensive rebounding, the energy, the physicality, and there's nobody else, certainly among the role players, who brings all of that in one player. And you get a sense, like, I know JJ Redick has talked a bit about certain defensive packages that he has in mind once Vando is back. And, you know, like we've talked about before, they're targeting the beginning of the season. I do not treat the beginning of the season as the season opener.
It's creeping up here, the beginning of the season.
I am more than willing to eat it and be wrong on this one. Like, I will.
Yeah, finish. Finish your thought about it. I mean, I'll lay out the timeline here in a second. But
you don't even need to at me to mock me, because I will be more than thrilled to be wrong about it. I would be extremely surprised if he was ready for the opener. I'm hoping somewhere between Game 5 and Game 10, which I guess is technically still the beginning of the season in the grand scheme of the regular season. But I just feel like there is a ceiling for what this team can do defensively without Jarred Vanderbilt. And we talked about this a lot last year. His value was proven really demonstratively through his absence.
It's one of these things, and to your point, like, you just break down the timeline. He's not going to play Thursday. They're probably not, he's not going to play Thursday or Friday, I should say. They're probably not going to practice on Saturday. So, like, the earliest he gets back on the floor to get, like, he's got to have at least a couple full practices before the game on Tuesday. So that leaves like Sunday and Monday, and like shoot around on Tuesday. So, like, maybe, you can get to a point where he's practicing into next week, which would be pretty good. Like, I can live with, Game 3, Game 2, Game 3, Game 4. But, like, to your point, it's like we've seen Gabe Vincent return. We've seen Max Christie inserted into the lineup. So you are adding defensive capability that they didn't really have much of last year, either because of injury or rotation choices. but there's still a gigantic hole in the front court in terms of somebody who can kind of do things that isn't named Anthony Davis or LeBron in the specific regular season games that he turns it up to 10. And that's not something you can either count on or want to count on a nightly basis over the course of the year. Like they don't have that other guy. Jackson Hayes isn't that kind of versatile defender. Rui Hachimura isn't that kind of versatile defender. And then there's a gap there.
I mean, Cam Reddish has certain things he can do well defensively, but not as many as Vando. And then in the meantime, you sacrifice just a lot of offense when Reddish is out there. So that's the
even more than you do. And it's just a different setup and a different alignment when Reddish plays versus Vando, who's not the most dynamic offensive player, but functions differently inside an offense. So the bottom line is basically this. It turned out, really dependent on Jarred Vanderbilt last year. The roster's the same. Therefore, you would think it stands to reason that they would be equally dependent on Jarred Vanderbilt this year. And the early returns in the preseason indicate that is true. So I know our friend Harrison Fagan from Silver Screen and Roll loves this construct. Andy, the season doesn't start until Jarred Vanderbilt is back in the lineup. It is one of these things where if the Lakers are going to get to their ceiling and have the kind of record that everybody wants them to be able to have, they need Jarred Vanderbilt back fast. 15 games if it turns into that. No evidence that it will yet, but like the longer you go without him up to speed, the worse off you are. And you have to factor in the possibility, like it was last year, that his return, he's not himself right away. The guy has not played basketball for a long time. The idea that he's going to step in game one and be exactly what they need him to be feels a little unfair to him.
It is unfair to my hope. And again, this is just me wish casting, but my hope is that part of the time that it's taken for him to get back, and remember, we didn't even realize that there were off-season foot injuries until Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick's pre-media day press conference. But and by the way, that explained a lot of like Jarred Vanderbilt not ready yet. We're all wondering really why, because he was dressed for Game 5 against Denver in April. But this,
I would like to point out, I didn't buy that in April.
Sure, but even if you didn't buy that he'd be on the floor, there is a disconnect between dressed for a game in April, not ready in September. Like there are questions that require answering, because that's an awfully long time to be, to get ready.
He would be better rested at that point, at the very least.
That's my point. There is no reason to assume, even if you thought he was a total red herring for that game, that there would be more substantial recovery left. It also, though, when he returns, that 9-man rotation, which he is clearly going to be a part of, that's likely going to reduce Dalton Knecht to either the 9.5-man or the periodic 10th man. Like he's the guy that's going to fall out of the rotation,
probably.
Which
I would think at least initially, yeah.
I think he will, unless JJ just decides that he wants to go more of a 10-man rotation.
Or let's talk about this after the break. Like, because my question, I had a slightly different question I was going to ask you about this sort of issue, but after the break, let's talk about what the criteria might be in terms of figuring out who might play and who doesn't in that last spot. So we'll get to that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can enjoy the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Let's just say you're watching a game and it feels like you are predicting everything before it happens. You just got this thing wired. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So all that info is streamlined. You can feel informed, and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed to get started when you place your first $5 bet. Plus, we are getting closer to the 24-25 NBA season, less than a week at this point. Our friends at FanDuel have options for you as of this recording. The Thunder are 3-1 favorites to win the Western Conference, followed by a three-way tie between the Wolves, Mavs, and Nuggets at 5-1. And you go down a little bit further. Grizzlies are 16-1, Lakers 19-1, Warriors 21-1, Pelicans 22-1. So those are some of the major players in the Western Conference. That's FanDuel.com.
Quick reminder, you can, as we all get prepared for the NBA season, make another Locked On podcast, specifically the Locked On NBA podcast, your first listen, or second listen, I should say, of every day. Great way to keep up with what's going on around the league as the season kicks off, scout all those Western Conference teams and all that other stuff. So I think the big question is, and I agree with you on sort of like a meritocracy pecking order thing, if you're going to play Max Christie, and they are going to play Max Christie at the start of the year. And you're going to play Vincent, and they're going to play Vincent. It's really hard to figure out how Connect has regular minutes. And I think that's okay if they're getting, what they want and need offensively. I think that the reason you might see Connect would just be that what Redick wants to do is something that Connect's skill set, specifically, not just his shooting ability, but his ability to shoot in multiple ways, off of screens, pin downs in different directions and all that other kinds of stuff. If that is something that he really just feels is very necessary for the offense, you might see that happen maybe, where Jackson Hayes drops out and they go a little smaller with Connect or something like that. I can see scenarios like that. I will say Connect hasn't shot himself into a role like that in the preseason. While I am not panicked about it, it's always an adjustment for all of these guys, and he certainly looks the part when he shoots. I think the ball is going to start going in. It might take 5 games, 10 games, 20 games, whatever. But I don't think it would be a different story if Connect was shooting 45% in the preseason, did the same in the summer league, and just showed like, wow, he's got this special shooting skill that we can integrate right away. I just don't see it yet.
No, it hasn't happened yet. And I agree with you that there could be certain matchups against a team like the Warriors. Frankly, you could maybe see Jackson Hayes get less time, Connect get that spot. Right. And
when Vando comes back, if you choose to go smaller, you can leave Hayes on the bench and maybe figure out ways to get Connect into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like and Redick has said he is not married to the idea of an ironclad 9-man rotation. He clarified that pretty quickly because I think Redick's starting to realize everything he says becomes a headline and taken really seriously, like the idea of 53s a game. We could do that, which clearly he was not being serious. A lot of people took him seriously, but I feel like unless he's really open to the idea of a 10-man rotation, it would be more matchup dependent that would put Connect in there even ahead of someone like Hayes, because you just need that size.
Right. He's the backup center. He's the only other center on the roster.
We've also seen a lot of versions with this team of what happens when the Lakers basically go with no backup center. There are certain things that work okay, but the limitations are massive. So, and again, it's not a problem with Connect, but I expect that when Vando is back, Connect's minutes and his spot in the rotation both will become tenuous, and honestly, it's fine.
Yeah. So we'll see what goes on here with the health of Vanderbilt until we hear differently that, guys, it's going to be a little longer. I am willing to be, Tuesday seems far-fetched at this point, just because, again, I laid out the timeline in the last segment. It's like, I don't think he gets enough practices in, full contact practices for the Lakers to be comfortable to put him in a game. Other interesting things that are going on, though, it is if it is, Andy, the beginning of the season, it's time to rank NBA players in order and try to get people to argue about it. And now we're not going to take the bait here, whether it's ESPN rank or it's the Ringers top 100 or fantasy rankings or whatever it might be. No, you tried to get us. We're not going to do it. LeBron and AD, what's interesting about these ranks are sort of the range of where these guys land. ESPN's, I think, top 10 is probably coming out today. We haven't seen it yet as we sit down to record this show. Presumably it's coming out. LeBron's in the top 10 somewhere. He's
unless he fell out of the top 100.
Unless
which you and I don't take the bait. I'm going to argue that one.
I would, you know what that would be? A conversation starter.
Yes. Like I don't give a bleep if you have LeBron ranked 7th, 9th, 14th. Honestly, don't give an F. Yep. If you have LeBron out of the top 100,
103, that seems low.
I am offended on behalf of the Lakers, the James family. Like I'm very upset.
I'm offended of anybody whose first or last name just happens to be James. Like anybody.
No, I will take up for the city of Akron, and I don't think I've ever been in Ohio before. But I will be upset.
So presumably he's in the top 10 somewhere. My guess is he'll be 7, 8, 9, something like that. Anthony Davis in those rankings is 13, a drop from last year, which seems a little unfair, but here we are. In the Ringer rankings, LeBron is 10, Anthony Davis is 9. You can, again, quibble about these things, who belongs ahead of somebody else. I don't care. The point is the Lakers have two essentially top 10 players in the NBA. Like they have two of those guys on their team, and it is hard to argue that either doesn't deserve that ranking. If anything, you could argue that Davis is probably something a little better than 13th best player in the league. So
I imagine he would argue that.
I'm sure he would, especially if you consider both sides of the ball. So the foundation, if you're looking for a reason why both Lakers fans and people who cover the game kind of refuse to, in case of media, refuse to completely count out the Lakers, and in the case of fans, get really annoyed when the Lakers don't seem like they're trying to do more. It's because they still have two of the top 10 players in the league, which is something that definitionally only a couple other teams can possibly have. There just aren't enough teams, Andy, mathematically, for a team to have for more than 5 teams to have more than 2 top 10 players. It just doesn't work.
Or even
so,
look, 2 top 15 players if this stuff
whatever
gets fluid. Like there are only a handful, and the Lakers. You can debate the supporting cast, and we will.
That's coming up next.
The Lakers still have, particularly when the playoffs roll around, and that is go time for LeBron. The Lakers have as good of a 1-2 punch as any team in the league. I still believe that.
100%. And I think we saw more evidence of that again in the summertime, in the Olympics, and just. I realize Olympic basketball is not the same thing. It is a different animal. It is apples and oranges. You can't compare it in so many important ways. But those are still, the best players in the world that are playing in this tournament. The U.S. team has, the best players on the best team in the world. And those were 2 of the best players on that team. It's just you can look at it, and LeBron, who I think is still a little, probably, if you're being honest, probably a little surprised at how well this is. When one of the media day when he came and talked, I mean, it seems pretty clear to me that he was expecting at this point in his career to be feeling like, even if it's not stuff we see internally, there. I gotta be. I don't know how much longer, because I see the little signs of erosion that other people don't. And he's not going to play. He's like Kobe. He's not going to play if he's, anything less than what he is right now. And he's like, I got years left in the tank. And so I think he's a little surprised by that. So just can argue about the timeline. But the point is, like, in that competition, in moments that might equate like the playoffs, the Lakers have 2 dominant players. So it really comes down to, what else?
Yeah. And What else? It involves players obviously 3 through 12, but as we will explain, a lot of what else really becomes a question of Austin Reaves. So that is what we're going to talk about next. Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Hims. Your sex life is important. You want it to be spontaneous, but your schedule's busy. You don't have time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on the site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you, discreet packaging for free, no insurance is needed. One low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's hims.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products that are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety.
The next component of this, Andy, like you say, is where, in terms of determining who the title contenders are, it's not so much do you have player 1, player 7, player 12, player 14, 2 of the guys in the top 20 or whatever. It's like, do you have 4 guys in the top 100? Like, the Boston Celtics have multiple players in that top 100, no matter which ranking you're looking at. And that kind of depth, when you consider how many players there are playing meaningful minutes in the NBA, is significant. The Lakers, when you scour the rest of those lists, the only other name that pops up is Austin Reaves. I have a debate whether D'Angelo Russell is one of the top 100 players in the league, but that's the point, is he's not there. And
look, the difference between top 100 and top 115, even 120.
Well, the difference between 80 and 120 is probably negligible on a lot of nights.
To me, what really matters isn't even where someone ranks once you start getting to the 80s, 90s, 100s, or if you think they would be just outside. It's not the number in terms of where they rank. It's when you look at all of these different rankings from different sites, the consensus, how many times does player X turn up? I think that's what actually really starts.
Yeah, I think that's
becoming
a good way.
revealing.
If somebody's sort of consensus in the top 100, so Reaves is that guy for the Lakers, and he's, what is it in the ESPN
72,
72, and then 81, I believe, for the Ringer.
Yep.
It's pretty good. You're in the top 100 there, in terms of how people see you. But the Lakers, I think, need that number, that consensus number, to go up. Like, if he's going to be the consensus third best player on a championship level team, as we've discussed, Andy, step one is, at the very least, you have to stop being the center of a debate that says, are you better than D'Angelo Russell? Which Reaves could not affirmatively say last year.
No, and even if you think Reaves is better overall than D'Lo, and I think you could make the argument, even though I think over the course of last season, D'Angelo Russell was better than Austin Reaves. If you want to make the argument that Reaves is better, that's fine. The problem the Lakers have right now is, neither D'Angelo Russell nor Austin Reaves is clear-cut good enough to be the third best player on a championship team. And I know we've had this conversation before, and it'll bring up a lot of comments that we welcome, by the way, in the YouTube comment section for the show. Third best player doesn't necessarily mean third option, third scorer. Like, there are different ways. It's kind of like that Supreme Court case where they describe pornography. We'll know what it is when we see it. What a third best player on a championship caliber team is. And Reaves
hopefully you don't find those things at the same time.
that would be very
Whoa, is that why he's the third best player on a champion? I didn't know people could bend that way. Good for him.
The issue right now for Reaves and D'Lo is that no matter who you think is the third best, neither one of them is, I think, even close to the level they need to be, so it's clear that's not shade against either one. Like, third best player on a championship caliber team is typically somebody, you can find teams that had an exception, but for the most part, you're talking about a guy that is like a consensus top 50, maybe even top 40 player. Like, you got to be really damn good to be at that level. And the problem the Lakers have is, beyond the fact that they don't have that player, I think they are very somewhere between convinced and or dead set that Reaves is the guy or is on the verge of being that guy, and designed the roster in a way that reflects the faith or belief that he will play at that level. And the fact that he's not, it's not a slam on Reaves, because Austin Reaves is a good player. He's a very good player. He's a player that can be important on a championship caliber team, but the gap has to be filled some way. And particularly when it feels like the Lakers are extremely disinclined to move Reaves for a guy like DeJounte Murray, for example, who, for what it's worth, is considered at the level that I'm talking about. They need Reaves to pick up his game and reach that level really, really quick, or they're going to need to make some hard decisions, because otherwise I don't see it happening. Even if other guys play to the level that is expected.
It's not entirely, it's not Reeves' fault. I'm trying to think if I'm phrasing this right, but like, you can get Austin Reaves, guys like that can be your quote unquote third best player if you have more players that are in that, 75 to 125 range. If you have 3 or 4 or 5 guys who kind of like, okay, they're not elite, but they're really effing good. Okay, now you might be. The Lakers don't have that. And so what they are trying to do, I think, is figure out how to get Reaves to that level where he can be the guy who, to some degree, compensates for maybe the lack of superior depth behind him. Somebody like Rui needs, like, they need that whole group to make a jump. And this is one of the things that I think makes people skeptical about the Lakers, is that you are looking for them to reach their ceiling. You're looking for a lot of things to happen. You're looking for not just 15% better from Reaves, which would put him closer to that borderline all-star. Like, the guy's a good player. He was on a really good World Cup team and was one of the best players out there for Team USA. But like, he needs to be in that sort of, probably not, he's not an all-star, probably not going to make an all-star team, but like somewhere in that all-star adjacent category. Mike Conley, who's an excellent NBA player, spent, over a decade in that space. They need Rui to be 15% better. They need D'Angelo Russell, if not to be better, to be as good as he was last year in one of the best years of his career. They need Max Christie to be much more like the player from like the first preseason game, and much less from an output standpoint like the player from Tuesday's preseason game. Like, all of these things are possible. They need all of them to happen. And I think the most pressure is on Reaves, because he's the guy, like you say, that they've centered a lot of things around in terms of how this roster is constructed, who is on it and who is not.
Yeah. I mean, they are clearly designing things for Reaves to take on that role. I mean, we're seeing it now where he's getting more on-ball reps, a lot of ways at the expense of D'Angelo Russell. And we can have this conversation at a different point.
Mhm.
And I know I've mentioned this before. I am not convinced that this is the best thing for D'Lo, for Reaves, much less the Lakers. Like, I think in a lot of ways they are taking both of these guys a bit outside of their strengths at flipping what they do at the expense of each other. But, you know, like I mentioned before with the DeJounte Murray thing, like there have been a lot of reports that Austin Reaves has been considered untouchable adjacent by this team. And I get the reluctance to part with him between the fact that, again, he's a good player.
Very good player.
He's got an outstanding contract.
Yes.
But I do think at times his contract is almost too good for the Lakers' own good, because it makes them even more precious and inclined to about Reaves and inclined to keep him.
Right.
And
It's the equivalent of having a player on a quarterback on a rookie scale that it opens up all these opportunities to build other things around, because you have a player who is better than their contract level says.
Well,
but the Lakers either have to decide, you know what, this is our best trade chip and we have to do something with it, or figure out a way to backfill the rest of the roster with the other stuff that they have. And that's the part that they have not been able to do.
Well, I was going to say it theoretically could open up the opportunity for more. The reality is the way this roster is constructed, it hasn't. And then in the meantime, when you think about, I mentioned DeJounte Murray, who I remember at the time around the trade deadline last year, I said, if the Lakers are really serious about going for it this year, they need to at least consider this deal, because DeJounte Murray is better than Austin Reaves. And especially if you don't think you're going to be able to move D'Lo and you need to get better, like, this isn't even me making a plea to move Austin Reaves. It's a plea to be more open to the possibilities of it. Again, if they are really serious about doing some of the things that they want, like Reaves's contract may be a bargain, but you don't get extra points on the court because of bang for the buck. Like the productions, the needs are the needs. And just don't seem like we're just picking on Austin Reaves. There are other guys in the top 100 that can be directly linked to the Lakers that always something there to remind me.
Right. I mean,
Miles.
I'm not in the mood for. I'm not at all interested in trading Reaves for anything other than a really clear upgrade.
Sure, but Brandon Bajemski, Jaime Jaquez, Alex Caruso, Miles Turner, like Kyrie, if you really want to go down that what if rabbit hole, like there's a lot in these rankings that, if nothing else, make you think about the roads not taken for the Lakers and how the future will play out with the road that they're on.
So it's something to watch through the rest of the preseason, through the early part of the season, is like what they do with Reaves, how long they're willing to try stuff with him. If he maybe struggles at the beginning of the season, Lakers do need to get off to a good start, and they have a very difficult early season schedule. Some leeway for future payoff is certainly worth pursuing if you think it in the long term can help you. But these are the questions that a head coach has to answer. And, when they get really hard, you wonder about, that's where, could this be a place where Redick's inexperience plays in? Darvin Ham also had some very difficult early season choices to make last year. Locked on Lakers, obviously Lakers playing tonight. We'll have a recap for you for that one for Friday's show. Get you ready for the weekend, Friday's game, get you ready for the start of the season. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers. We'll see everyone tomorrow.